Hello, very good morning to all. Today we are going to discuss Robert Browning. And Robert Browning is the part of English literature, paper first for BA third year students. So, let us come to the point. Robert Browning was born in 1812 and he died in 1889. Robert Browning was born in Camberwell on the outskirts of London in 1812. His early life. Browning's father was outwardly a businessman, a clerk for 50 years in the Bank of England. Inwardly, he was an interesting combination of the scholar and the artist with the best tastes of both. His mother was a sensitive musical woman. Next point, Browning started reading by the age of 5. His schooling, though started at the age of 5, was short and desultory, his education being attended to by private tutors and by his father, who left the boy largely to follow his own inclinations. Like the young Milton, Browning grew fond of music as per his mother's inclinations, though music seems to have no consistent effect upon his poems as it is seen in the poems of John Milton. Browning wrote his first poem at the age of 6. Like Tennyson, Browning also found his work very early, and for almost 50 years, hardly a week passed that he did not write poetry. He began to write at the age of 6 in imitation of Byron because he was greatly influenced by Byron. But this early work has been lost. He was a promising writer. Next point, read from his father's rare book collection, acquired a broad range of different literatures. His father had a rich collection of rare books that favored nurturing the poetic spirit in him. When his parents came to know of his poetic inclinations, they encouraged him to write poetry. They wanted him to grow up as a poet. At the age of 12, he wrote a volume of lyrical poems that was titled as Incondata, but subsequently he destroyed them. Only 2 of the poems which were included in this collection survive till now. His works. Browning, if we talk about, was a major Victorian poet and contemporary of Alfred Lord Tennyson. While Tennyson favors science, Browning favors religion. As I told you in the beginning, in the first lecture, when we were talking about the Victorian era, that Victorian era has 2 types of conflicts. One was the people were favoring the advent of science, and the other was the religion. This controversy occurred with the book of Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species, which specified that people or human beings are not the gift of God, but the evolution of science. So people were in dilemma whether to follow religion or the science. So Browning is also a poet of the Victorian compromise, but basically he favored religion because he also believes in life after death, as it is seen in his works. So if we talk about his works, his earliest known work is Pauline, that was published in 1833. It is a tribute to P.V. Shelley, who is the Romantic poet, and his poetry. Browning could not find any publisher who would even consider Pauline, and the work was published by means of money furnished by an indulgent relative of Browning. The poem got scant notice from the reviewers after its publication. Then comes his dramatic lyrics. This work is a collection of his lyrical poems, and dramatic, as the name indicates, it is, you see, if we talk about the poetry of Robert Browning, most of the poems are in the cult of dramatic writing. Dramatic means it has the qualities of drama, just like the character development is there, the incidents which are happening, it appears the way they are delineated, that everything is happening before our eyes. So dramatic quality is there in his poems. So this dramatic lyrics was published in 1842, and the poem that is prescribed in your syllabus, My Last Duchess, is the part of this collection. Then comes his dramatic romances that was published in 1845. This again is a collection of his lyrical poems, and they are all written in the form of dramatic monologues. In 1846, he suddenly became famous, not because he finished his work, Bells and Pomegranates, that I have not mentioned in this list. It is also a collection of poems, and in that year, he eloped with the best known literary woman in England, Elizabeth Barrett. Thereafter, until his own work compelled attention, he was known chiefly as the man who married Elizabeth Barrett. And because this marriage was against the consent of both the families, they remained most of the time in Italy. They hardly returned to England, and it was only after Elizabeth Barrett Browning's death in 1861 that they came back to Browning came back to England. Then comes his work, Men and Women. This work was published in 1855, and another work, Dramatic Personae. This work was published in 1864, and with these two works, he began to revive his reputation as a poet. The Ring and the Book. The Ring and the Book is Browning's masterpiece. It is an immense poem, twice as long as Paradise Lost. And this was the work which confirmed his literary, craftsmanship, we can say. He is considered to be a great writer on behalf of this book only. And before that, he was not considered to be a great writer, but still his poems are having a dramatic quality, and it is a different genre. That's why he was, considered to be a great writer on this behalf. And if we talk about the writing style of Browning, basically, he is known for his dramatic monologues. As you see in the list of the books, most of the collections of the poems that he has written, they are beginning with the title dramatic, whether it is the dramatic lyrics, whether it is the dramatic romances, whether it is the dramatic, personae. So all these are in the dramatic monologue form. Dramatic monologue, if we talk about, it is a kind of poem in which a character at some critical moment addresses an identifiable but silent audience, thereby unwillingly revealing his or her real personality. In poetry, dramatic monologue is also known as a persona poem that shares many characteristics with a theatrical monologue, in which an audience is implied. Implied means it is thought of whether some audience is there. So we are assuming the audience in this. There is no dialogue, and the poet speaks through an assumed voice, a character, a fictional identity, or a persona. So this is termed as dramatic monologue. And if we talk about the questions which are concerned with dramatic which are concerned with Robert Browning, the main question that is asked is, what do you mean by dramatic monologue, and justify My Last Duchess or the Prospects or the other poems which he has written, The Last Ride Together, all these poems as a dramatic monologue. So he is considered to be the proficient writer of the dramatic monologues. Next point is influence of late Italian Renaissance. As we all know that once he eloped with Elizabeth Barrett, he lived away from England. So As he was far away from England, his poetry does not ponder much over the social problems or the moral concerns of the age. On the other hand, it reflects the dramatic world of the late Renaissance in Italy, an imagination possessed by intense emotions and overriding passions. He also moved away from the subjective expression of romantic poetry. His poetry is not subjective actually. He objectifies that. It is not, the speaker is not the writer himself. He reflects as if some other person is there who is representative of the same class. Then comes obscurity in his poems. Obscure, as you all know, which is hard to understand, not easily understandable and all. So there are certain traits for which Browning is famous, and of these, obscurity is the one which was responsible for his slow rise to fame. As we all know that his earlier poetic works were not considered to be great. He hardly got any publication for his first work. So this was all due to the obscurity that was there in his writings. And this obscurity occurs in his works due to his compressed speech. The colloquialism. Colloquialism means the language of, we can say, the general conversation that is taking place between the two persons, colloquialism. And in his dramatic monologue, it appears as if the speaker is talking to someone who is present. So colloquialism. The quickness of a character's thoughts, the thoughts of the character which are developed in his poems, they are very quick. We can't apprehend the things what is going to be the next. So that is there. And the fast pace of the narrative often lead to difficulties in interpreting his poems. That's why his poems become obscure. Optimism. In most of his poems, he remains optimistic. He thinks about a world which is after death. He believes in birth after death. So his poems rest on his concept of love, his faith in religion, and a realistic appraisal of successes and failures. He feels that life is a mingling of both failures and successes. So if you are not able to attain anything in this life, definitely in the other life you will be given a chance to complete the task. And next thing is psychological aspects of human nature. He has a great understanding of the human psychology. And this in-depth knowledge of the psychology of the other man, of the other person who is the speaker in most of his dramatic monologues, makes him a great writer, we can say. He has a better understanding of the psychological perspective of a man who is in an adverse situation, as we see in his poems, whether we talk about My Last Duchess, whether we talk about Prospice or The Last Ride Together. In all these poems, the critical tendency due to the criminal aspect that is there in the mind of the speaker, that is very much exposed by the writer, that makes him a great writer. And he has deep knowledge of the psychology of the human beings that he is portraying. So all these characteristics are associated with the writing of Robert Browning, a great writer of the Victorian era. He is a writer without whom we can't imagine Victorian era. So he has that kind of personality. And later on in the next class, we will talk about his poem, The Last Ride Together. Wish you all the best. Thank you.